Aryan Vale had translated 17 different words for regret across 9 alien languages, but none of them quite captured what he felt stepping off the shuttle onto the Star Temple of Velar. The docking bay smelled like ozone and something sweet he couldn't identify, possibly incense, possibly the exhaust from their propulsion cores. With alien architecture, you could never really tell. Try not to touch anything that glows, his liaison had told him before vanishing into a crowd of robed figures. Helpful. The temple drifted in a stable orbit around a gas giant whose storms were visible through the transparent sections of the hull. Aryan had seen plenty of impressive structures in his years hopping between frontier worlds, but Velar was different. The walls seemed to breathe. Not metaphorically. He could see them expanding and contracting in a slow rhythm that matched no heartbeat he recognized. The metal beneath his boots carried a faint vibration, as if the entire structure was humming a song just below the threshold of hearing. He was supposed to be translating ceremonial texts, something about ancient treaties and the proper way to address a seraphic dignitary without accidentally declaring war. Standard diplomatic work. Boring, safe, and exactly the kind of assignment that paid well enough to fund his real research. Except nobody had mentioned the temple would be this empty. Aryan wandered through corridors that curved in ways that hurt his sense of direction. The other members of the human contingent had been shuffled off to their quarters, but he'd made a wrong turn somewhere near what he thought was a garden, but turned out to be some kind of meditation chamber filled with crystalline formations that chimed when he breathed too hard near them. He'd apologized to the crystals, just in case. Now he found himself descending a ramp that spiraled downward into what felt like the heart of the temple. The light changed here, shifting from the cold white of the upper levels to something warmer, almost amber. The projected stars on the ceiling grew denser, more detailed. He recognized a few constellations, but most were alien to him, configurations visible only from distant sectors of the galaxy. The sanctum opened before him without warning, a vast circular chamber where the walls fell away into carefully maintained shadow. At its center, on a pedestal of stone that definitely breathed, sat a suit of armor. And kneeling beside it, her back to him, was a woman. Aryan froze. He'd gotten very good at knowing when he'd stumbled into something he wasn't supposed to see. This had all the hallmarks, the private space, the ritual posture, the complete lack of guards or witnesses. He should leave, immediately, quietly. He took a step backward and his boots scraped against the floor. She didn't turn, but her voice reached him clearly. Low, controlled, with an accent that made each word feel carved. The sanctum is off-limits to visitors. Right, yes, completely understood. Aryan raised his hands even though she couldn't see him. I'm actually very lost, impressively lost. I'm fairly certain I passed the same crystal formation 3 times, which shouldn't be geometrically possible, but here we are. The temple adjusts its interior layout. She still hadn't turned. It finds your presence curious. Well, that makes 2 of us. He should definitely leave. His feet didn't move. I'm Aryan Vale, linguist, human, obviously human. That's probably apparent from the lack of. He gestured vaguely at his very normal, very rounded ears. She rose then, a fluid motion that suggested either grace or extensive military training. Possibly both. When she faced him, Aryan forgot whatever joke he'd been about to make. She was tall, nearly his height, with skin so pale it seemed to gather the amber light and hold it. Her hair fell in a thick braid over one shoulder, black enough to drink shadows. But it was her ears that marked her as other, long, sweeping back in elegant points that gave her profile an almost blade-like quality. She wore simple clothing beneath a half-fastened coat that bore markings he recognized as military insignia. High rank, very high, General Seraph Nix. She studied him with eyes that were dark and completely unreadable. You are the linguist assigned to the treaty documentation. That's me, master of ancient verbs and ceremonial syntax. He tried for a smile. I promise I wasn't snooping. The temple seems to have a sense of humor about its hallways. The temple doesn't have a sense of humor. She turned back to the armor, dismissing him. You should return to your quarters. Arian knew he should. Every instinct honed by years of diplomatic work told him to bow, apologize, and leave. But something about the armor held him. It was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with aesthetics, beautiful like a mathematical proof, like a perfectly translated phrase that captured something previously inexpressible. The armor sat open on its pedestal, each plate separated to reveal the intricate interior. The outer surface was covered in scripts, layered over each other in a palimpsest of dead languages. He could see at least 4 different writing systems, maybe more. His fingers itched to trace them, to decode them. It's pre-Thuric construction, he said, half to himself. But those markings along the collar are definitely Vardeshi. And that lower script, is that old Seraphic? I thought all examples were destroyed in the purge. Seraph's shoulders tensed. You can read old Seraphic. Some. It's related to a human script from before the descent. Lot of crossover in the grammatical structure. He took a step closer, forgetting himself. Where did you find this? These pieces shouldn't exist together. They're from completely different eras. The armor is older than the coalition. Her voice had changed, carrying a weight that made the words feel heavy. It was found drifting. No ship, no crew, just the armor sealed in a capsule near the edge of known space. Drifting armor, Arian nodded slowly, sure. That's completely normal and not at all ominous. Your humor is noted. Sorry, nervous habit. I joke when he stopped. The inner curve of the breastplate had caught the light, and for just a moment he saw something that made his breath stick in his throat. Symbols, carved into the interior where no one would see them unless the armor was opened. Symbols he knew. He gestured vaguely at the armor, not trusting his voice. Seraph regarded him for a long moment. Then inexplicably she stepped aside. Arian approached slowly, his heart doing something complicated in his chest. The symbols were small, precise, carved with a tool that had left no rough edges. The script was archaic, pre-descent human, the kind of thing he'd only seen in fragments recovered from dead colonies. He read his own name, not a word that looked like his name, not a similar configuration. His exact name spelled in letters that hadn't been used by any living culture in over 300 years. He touched the metal, half expecting it to burn. It was cold, solid, real. That's my name. I know, Seraph said quietly. I've known since the prophecy was unsealed. Arian turned to her, a dozen questions colliding in his mind. But before he could voice any of them, alarms began to sound in the distance, faint but growing closer. Seraph's expression hardened. You should not have come here, Arian Vale. Trust me, he said, staring at his name carved into impossible metal. I'm starting to realize that. Arian had not slept. He'd tried, staring at the ceiling of his assigned quarters while the temple hummed its incomprehensible song around him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those letters carved into ancient metal. His name. His impossible, shouldn't exist there name. At 400 ship time, he gave up and went back. The sanctum wasn't hard to find this time. Either the temple had decided to cooperate, or his subconscious had memorized the route despite his complete lack of directional sense. He suspected the former. The walls seemed to lean toward him now, guiding rather than confusing. Seraph was already there. She sat cross-legged on the floor beside the armor, her coat discarded, wearing only a sleeveless black shirt that revealed arms marked with scars that looked ceremonial. Her braid had come partially undone, strands of dark hair falling across her face as she studied a handheld projection device that cast blue light across her features. The human linguist returns, she said without looking up. I calculated 73% probability you would. That's generous. I gave myself 50-50 odds. Arian descended the ramp slowly, hands visible, trying to project harmlessness. The other 50% involved me drinking something very strong and pretending last night, was a stress hallucination. Was it effective? I don't drink, terrible alcohol tolerance. Once got tipsy on what I thought was fruit juice at a Kandari naming ceremony. Ended up accidentally proposing marriage to a decorative plant. The corner of Seraph's mouth moved. Not quite a smile, but close enough that Aryan felt absurdly pleased with himself. The Kandari take botanical relationships seriously, she said, so I discovered there was paperwork. He gestured toward the armor. I need to see it again. The inscription. I need to verify I didn't imagine it. Seraph deactivated her projection and stood in one fluid motion. You didn't imagine it. Humor me anyway, I'm a linguist. We have trust issues with our own eyes. She stepped aside, granting him access. The armor gleamed in the amber light, still open on its pedestal, still impossible. Aryan approached it like a man approaching a bomb he'd been told to defuse with nothing but optimism and a dictionary. The interior plates were exactly as he remembered. The script was predescent human, carved with a precision that suggested mechanical tools far beyond what that culture should have possessed. And there, unmistakable, was his name. Aryan Vale, he read aloud, his voice barely above a whisper. In a script that died out approximately 340 years ago, give or take a decade depending on which colony records you trust. 342 years, Seraph corrected. I researched the dating after the armor came into my family's possession. Aryan traced the letters without touching them, his finger hovering a centimeter above the metal. How long ago was that? 4 generations. My great-grandmother recovered it from the derelict capsule. She was a salvage captain before the coalition formed, back when the frontier was less frontier and more actively murderous. That sounds like a fun time. She lost 2 ships and most of her crew to spatial anomalies. Fun is not the word she would have used. Seraph moved to stand beside him, close enough that he could smell something sharp and clean, weapon oil, maybe, or the antiseptic soap used in military quarters. The armor was the only thing in the capsule. No body, no other equipment, just this, sealed and waiting. Waiting for what? For someone to be foolish enough to try wearing it. Aryan glanced at her, and people tried. My great-grandmother first. The armor rejected her within seconds, neural feedback strong enough to cause permanent tremors in her right hand. My grandmother lasted longer, nearly a full minute before the pain became unbearable. My mother refused to attempt it. She said the armor felt wrong, like wearing someone else's skin. But you're going to try. It wasn't a question. I don't have a choice. Seraph's voice remained level, but something moved behind her eyes. The war is coming, Aryan Vale. Not the small conflicts we've managed to contain, not border skirmishes between colony worlds. An actual war that will burn through sectors and leave nothing but debris. And this armor is supposed to stop it. The armor is a conduit. It interfaces with the star engines, ancient technology buried in the temple's core. With the right bearer, it could control weapon systems powerful enough to glass a moon or shield an entire fleet. The prophecy says. I keep hearing about this prophecy. Aryan straightened, putting his hands in his pockets to keep from doing something stupid like touching the armor. What exactly does it say? Seraph was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled up her projection device again, entering a series of commands that made the blue light flare and resolve into text. Old Seraphic, written in the formal style reserved for religious or legal documents. Can you read this? She asked. Aryan leaned in, his mind automatically parsing the grammar and root words. The dialect was archaic, but the structure was clear enough. When the armor wakes, 2 shall be bound, one who wears, one who opens. The name written in its bones will unlock the path or seal it forever. If their wills align, the armor becomes whole. If they fail. He paused. The next part is unclear. Either the armor dies or the bearers die. The verb form is ambiguous. Comforting, Seraph said dryly. I'm sure it's the armor that dies, probably, maybe 60-40 odds. Your optimism is noted. Arian studied the text again, then looked at his name carved into the armor's interior. So someone at some point before I was born, before my parents were born, carved my name into alien armor that was floating in space. And now, there's a prophecy saying I'm supposed to help you unlock it, or we both die horribly. Essentially, any chance this is an elaborate prank? Because I once knew a xenoarchaeologist with a very specific sense of humor and access to industrial engraving tools. Would that make you feel better? Marginally. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture he'd never managed to break. Why didn't you tell me this last night? You were already in shock, and there were protocols. The prophecy is classified coalition intelligence. I'm violating approximately 7 regulations by showing you this. I appreciate the felony. Arian turned back to the armor, his mind racing through possibilities. If my name opens it somehow, there must be a mechanism. A biometric lock, maybe, or a linguistic key. Something in my DNA or my voice pattern. Or something in your will. Seraph deactivated the projection. The armor doesn't respond to physical input, it responds to intent. Great, so I just have to want it to open. It's more complicated than that. It always is. Arian crouched beside the armor, examining the inner plates more closely. The script continued beyond his name, more words in Old Seraphic, some in languages he didn't recognize. These other inscriptions, what do they say? Most are warnings, instructions for the bearer. One phrase repeats throughout. The weight of stars must be shared or it crushes all who carry it alone. Poetic. Arian stood, brushing dust from his knees. So we're looking at a piece of technology that requires 2 people, bound together somehow to function. And if it doesn't work, best case scenario is the armor becomes an expensive paperweight. Worst case, we die screaming in neural agony. You paint such vivid pictures. Seraph almost smiled again. When the war begins, I'll have no choice but to attempt the binding. The coalition's defensive grid won't hold against what's coming. The star engines are our only advantage. When does the war begin? As if in answer, a low vibration ran through the temple. Not the usual hum, but something deeper, more urgent. Seraph's expression shifted immediately, the momentary softness vanishing behind military precision. Soon, she said. Sooner than projected. Enemy scouts were detected at the outer markers 2 hours ago. 2 hours, and you're telling me now. I calculated you would panic less after seeing the armor again. That's not how panic works. But Arian found himself moving toward the armor anyway, drawn by something he couldn't name. If we're going to do this, if I'm going to help you unlock this thing, I need to know what binding actually means. What happens when the armor wakes? Seraph met his eyes, and for the first time since he'd met her, he saw something that might have been fear. I don't know, she admitted. No one has ever succeeded. The diplomatic quarters had been evacuated 3 hours ago. Arian learned this from a frantic message on his personal comm device, sent by someone whose name he didn't recognize and whose authority he had no reason to trust. The message used words like imminent engagement and non-essential personnel and immediate departure. He deleted it and went looking for breakfast. The temple's commissary was empty except for an automated food dispenser that offered him 17 varieties of nutrient paste, none of which looked appealing. He selected something labeled morning grain blend that turned out to be purple and tasted like regret mixed with artificial sweetener. The temple is adjusting to siege protocols, a voice said behind him. Flavor profiles are a low priority. Arian turned to find Seraph standing in the doorway, now wearing full military dress, a fitted uniform in deep gray with silver insignia that caught the light. Her hair was bound in an intricate series of knots that looked like they could double as weapons in an emergency. She looked like she hadn't slept either. I assumed you'd be in a war room somewhere, moving tiny ships around a holographic display, Arian said. I was. They don't need me for another hour. She moved to the dispenser and selected something without looking at the options. The Coalition's defense fleet is establishing a perimeter. Enemy forces are holding position at the heliopause. Both sides are performing elaborate tactical dances, while pretending this isn't about to become catastrophic. How long do we have? 4 hours, maybe 6 if both sides continue posturing. She took a sip of whatever the machine had given her, made a face, but continued drinking. Command wants me to evacuate with the civilian contingent. But you're not going to. The armor is here. The star engines are here. This is where I need to be. She sat down across from him, setting her cup on the table with a precise motion that spoke of years of muscle memory. You should leave, though. There's a transport departing in 40 minutes. And miss whatever happens when you try to bond with ancient murder armor. I don't think so. Arian pushed his purple nutrient paste away. Besides, the prophecy seems pretty clear that I'm supposed to be involved in this. The prophecy could be wrong. Could it? Because in my experience, when your name is mysteriously carved into alien artifacts, ignoring that usually works out poorly. Seraph was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. I've spent 3 years studying that armor. I know every inscription, every mechanical joint, every power conduit. I've run simulations, consulted engineers, spoken with scholars who have devoted lifetimes to understanding pre-Thuric technology. And I'm still terrified of it. She said it simply without shame. My great-grandmother's tremors never stopped. My grandmother had nightmares for the rest of her life about something she couldn't quite remember from her attempt. The armor doesn't just reject, it marks you, changes you. But you're going to try anyway. 6 billion people live in the sectors that will burn if the star engines aren't activated. 6 billion against 1 seems like acceptable mathematics. Arian studied her across the table. This woman with her pointed ears and her contained fear and her willingness to be marked by something that had broken everyone who came before her. What if the prophecy is right? What if the binding requires both of us? Then you'll be marked too. Seraph met his eyes. I won't ask you to do that. Good thing I'm volunteering. He tried for a smile. Though I'd like to point out that my skill set includes translating dead languages and accidentally offending people in multiple dialects. I'm not sure what I bring to the whole, bonding with sentient armor process. Your name is carved in its bones. That has to mean something. Or it's a clerical error on a cosmic scale. The universe isn't known for its attention to detail. The universe, Seraph said quietly. Put your name inside armor that predates your civilization. I don't think it makes clerical errors. They sat in silence for a moment, drinking their terrible dispensary beverages while the temple hummed around them. Somewhere above, Arian knew, ships were positioning themselves for violence. Weapons were being charged, shields calibrated, final communications sent to families who might never receive them. Tell me about the star engines, he said finally. If we're doing this, I should probably know what we're activating. Seraph's expression shifted into something more familiar, the focused look of someone briefing a subordinate. The engines are built into the temple's foundation. Nobody knows who made them or when. The temple was constructed around them, or possibly grew from them. The archaeotechnology makes it difficult to determine cause and effect. Naturally, they function as a defensive and offensive grid, capable of projecting energy barriers across a radius of approximately 3 light hours, or channeling concentrated fire that could crack a planet's crust. The armor is the control mechanism. It translates the wearer's neural patterns into commands the engines can interpret. So you think the armor, and then think really hard about where to shoot the giant death laser. Essentially, yes. What could possibly go wrong? Arian leaned back in his chair. I assume there's a reason nobody's tried to activate these engines before. Every attempt has resulted in catastrophic neural feedback. The engines are too vast, too complex. A single mind can't process the information flow required to control them. The armor tries to compensate by amplifying the wearer's cognitive functions, but the human, or seraphic, brain isn't designed for that kind of expansion. So brains explode, or whatever the technical term is. Cascading synaptic failure, but yes, effectively. Seraph's fingers tightened around her cup. The prophecy suggests that two minds properly aligned could handle the load. One to wear the armor, one to anchor it. One to command, one to stabilize. And you think I'm the anchor because my name is on the armor. I think you're the anchor because the armor has been waiting 300 years for you to exist. Arian wanted to make a joke, something to cut through the weight of that statement, but nothing came. He stared at his purple nutrient paste and tried to imagine what it meant to be carved into destiny before his parents were born, before his grandparents were born, before anyone who shared his DNA had even considered leaving Earth. I should warn you, he said finally, I'm terrible at anchoring. I once got lost in a space station that was literally just a corridor with 2 doors. The temple seems to like you, that's promising. The temple also thinks purple nutrient paste is acceptable food. Its judgment is suspect. This time Seraph definitely smiled. A quick flash of something genuine before her military composure reasserted itself. She stood collecting her cup. We have 4 hours. I need to brief the command staff and finalize evacuation protocols. You should rest. Will you? No. Then I'll see you in the sanctum. Arian stood as well. One question, when we do this, when we try to bind with the armor, what does it feel like? Your grandmother, your great-grandmother, did they describe it? Seraph paused in the doorway, her back to him. My great-grandmother said it felt like drowning in starlight. My grandmother said it felt like being unmade and remade wrong. She turned slightly, her profile sharp against the corridor's ambient light. Neither of them could explain why they kept trying after the pain stopped them the first time. They said the armor called them back, made them want to try again even knowing what it would cost. That's deeply unsettling. Yes. Seraph's expression was unreadable. 4 hours, Arian Vale. If you change your mind, I'll understand. She left before he could respond, her footsteps echoing down the corridor until the temple's hum swallowed them whole. Arian looked down at his purple nutrient paste, abandoned on the table. Then he looked at his hands, ordinary and human, and somehow essential to a prophecy he didn't understand. I'm definitely going to die, he told the empty commissary. The temple hummed in what might have been agreement or possibly amusement. With alien architecture, you could never really tell. The alarms began exactly 3 hours and 47 minutes after breakfast. Arian was in his quarters, pretending to read a linguistics journal while actually staring at the wall and contemplating the various ways neural feedback could kill a person. The sound cut through his spiraling thoughts like a blade, sharp, insistent, impossible to ignore. His comm device lit up with tactical displays he didn't understand, showing red markers converging on blue ones in patterns that probably meant something dire to people with military training. He grabbed his jacket and ran. The temple's corridors had transformed. Emergency lighting cast everything in shades of amber and shadow. The walls had stopped breathing, locked down, Arian realized, preparing for impact. He passed a few scattered crew members moving with practiced urgency, their faces set in expressions he recognized from his time on frontier stations. This was the look of people who knew exactly how bad things were about to get. The sanctum was empty when he arrived. The armor sat on its pedestal, still open, still waiting. Arian approached it slowly, his heart doing complicated things in his chest that probably weren't medically advisable. You're early, Seraph said from behind him. He turned to find her descending the ramp, now wearing something between her military uniform and combat gear, flexible armor plates over reinforced fabric, designed for movement rather than ceremony. Her hair was still bound in its intricate knots, but she'd added what looked like a neural interface collar around her neck, tiny lights blinking in sequence along its edge. The enemy stopped posturing, she continued, her voice level despite the alarms echoing through the temple. "They're committing to a full assault. The defense fleet is engaging now, but they won't hold for more than an hour." "So no pressure," Arian said. "Minimal pressure at best." She moved past him to the armor, her fingers tracing its surface with the familiarity of long acquaintance. "I need to begin the donning sequence. It takes approximately 12 minutes for all the plates to lock into position. And then we discover if the prophecy was right, or if I die screaming while you watch." She said it matter-of-factly, the way someone might comment on the weather. "I apologize in advance if it's the latter. It will probably be disturbing. I've seen disturbing things. Once witnessed a Kandari mating dance that violated several principles of biology I thought were universal. This will be worse. I believe you." Arian moved to stand beside her, close enough to see the tension in her shoulders despite her controlled exterior. "What do you need me to do?" Seraph pulled up a holographic display from her wrist interface, showing a schematic of the armor with various points highlighted in blue. "When the armor locks, it will attempt to establish a neural connection with me. That's when the feedback begins, the point where everyone before me failed. According to the prophecy, you need to provide an anchor, a secondary connection that stabilizes the link. How? Place your hand on the inner plate where your name is carved. The armor should recognize you and establish a bridge between us." "Should, that's a very optimistic word choice." "I'm working with limited data." Seraph began removing her outer armor plates, setting them aside with precise care. "If you feel pain, severe disorientation, or the sensation of your consciousness being pulled apart, remove your hand immediately." "What about you? What do you do if you feel those things?" "Endure them." She pulled off the neural collar, revealing pale skin marked with the contact points where the device had been resting. "I don't have the option to stop once I begin." The temple shuddered around them, a deep vibration that felt like it came from the bones of the structure itself. Dust fell from the ceiling in small cascades. Somewhere above them, Arian knew, weapons fire was tearing through shields and hull plating. People were dying in the cold mathematics of combat. Seraph stepped up to the armor and turned her back to it. The plates began moving on their own, ancient servos whispering to life as they recognized her proximity. The breastplate opened wider, revealing the complex interior, the carved names, the layered scripts, the mechanisms that looked half biological in their intricacy. "Last chance to evacuate," she said quietly. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Arian positioned himself where he could reach the inner plate, though I'd like to note for the record that I have no idea what I'm doing. "Neither do I." Seraph backed into the armor slowly, letting it begin to close around her. "We're improvising based on prophecy and desperate optimism. It's practically a human tradition. Seraphic too, apparently. We learned from the best." The armor began locking into place, each plate sealing with a sound like thunder compressed into a whisper. Arian watched Seraph's expression shift from controlled calm to concentration to something that might have been pain. Her breathing quickened. The lights along her throat where the neural collar had been began to pulse in rapid sequence. "It's starting," she said through clenched teeth. "The connection, it's too much, too fast. I can feel the engines waking up and they're vast. Arian, they're so vast I can't." Now he reached for the inner plate. Now. Arian pressed his palm against his carved name, and the universe inverted. He felt Seraph's mind crash into his like a wave, desperate and drowning and pulling him under. But beneath that deeper was something else, the awareness of the armor itself, ancient and patient and finally awake after centuries of waiting. And deeper still, the star engines, vast networks of power that extended through dimensions he didn't have names for. It should have been overwhelming, should have shredded his consciousness like tissue paper in a hurricane. But somehow, impossibly, he was still himself. Still Arian Vale, linguist and professional wanderer and accidental anchor to something that defied comprehension. He felt Seraph stabilize, her panic receding as his presence gave her something to orient around. Their minds didn't merge, nothing so invasive as that. Instead, they existed in parallel, two separate streams flowing in the same direction, each one supporting the other's weight. The armor completed its locking sequence. Seraph's eyes opened, but they glowed now with a light that came from somewhere else. She flexed her fingers, and the entire temple responded, power flowing through conduits that had been dormant for longer than human civilization had existed. "I can see them," she whispered. "The enemy ships, the defense fleet, every weapon, every shield, every vulnerable point. Aryan, I can see everything. Can you control it?" He kept his hand pressed against the plate, feeling the connection pulse between them like a heartbeat. "Yes, no, maybe." She laughed, slightly manic. "It's like trying to conduct an orchestra where every instrument is also a star. But you're here. You're the rhythm I can follow. As long as you're here, I can." Another impact shook the temple, harder this time. The armor flared with light, and Aryan felt Seraph's will extend outward, reaching for the star engine's defensive systems. Barriers materialized around the temple, shimmering fields of force that caught the next barrage and dispersed it harmlessly. "That worked," Seraph said, sounding surprised. "Don't stop now." Aryan's hand was starting to hurt where it pressed against the metal, but he didn't dare move it. "You're doing great. Very heroic. 10 out of 10 for cosmic power management." "Your humor is," she gasped as another connection locked into place. "Actually helpful. Keep talking. Your voice gives me something concrete to focus on." "All right, did I ever tell you about the time I tried to order coffee on a Vrexian trade station and accidentally challenged someone to ritual combat?" "No." The armor moved, Seraph taking a step forward, and the star engines responded with a pulse of power that made the air taste like lightning. "Tell me." So Aryan talked. He told her about the Vrexian warrior who'd taken pity on him and agreed to resolve their honor dispute through a poetry competition instead of violence. He told her about getting lost in the space station corridor. He told her about his terrible alcohol tolerance and the decorative plant that technically might still be his legal spouse on Kandari Prime. And while he talked, Seraph fought. She didn't move like someone learning to use new power. She moved like the armor had always been hers, like the star engines had been waiting specifically for her will to shape them. The temple's weapons came online, precise and devastating. Enemy ships that breached the defense perimeter found themselves facing fire that couldn't miss, guided by a mind connected to systems that calculated trajectories across dimensional boundaries. The battle lasted 17 minutes. Aryan felt every second of it through the connection, felt Seraph's fierce concentration, her split-second decisions, her grief each time she had to destroy a ship knowing people died when she did. But she didn't hesitate, didn't break. When the enemy forces finally retreated, jumping back to whatever staging area had launched them, Seraph stood in the sanctum breathing hard, the armor's glow fading to a soft luminescence. "We did it," she said quietly. "Aryan, we actually." She stumbled. Aryan caught her before she could fall, his hand finally leaving the carved plate as he helped support her weight. The armor began opening, releasing her in segments, but she didn't collapse, just leaned against him, trembling with exhaustion and relief. "That was significantly more intense than anticipated," she managed. "Are you all right?" "I think so. My head feels like someone tried to pour an ocean through it, but I'm alive. We're both alive." She looked up at him, her eyes their normal dark color now, no longer glowing. The prophecy was right, about everything. "About us being bound." "Yes," she said it simply. "I can still feel you, not your thoughts but your presence, like you're standing in a room adjacent to my mind." Aryan realized he felt the same thing, an awareness of Seraph that existed somewhere beyond normal perception. "Is that permanent?" "I don't know. Possibly." She straightened, putting some distance between them but not letting go of his arm. I should probably apologize for linking your consciousness to alien war machines without extensive informed consent protocols. But I signed up for this, mostly. He smiled. Besides, if I'm going to be cosmically bound to someone, you're decent company, very competent, excellent armor-wearing posture. Your humor remains noted. I'll take that as a compliment. They stood together in the sanctum as the alarms finally silenced. Above them, the defense fleet was sending confused reports about the temple's sudden activation. Diplomatic channels were requesting explanations. The Coalition Command wanted immediate tactical briefings, but for now, in this moment, it was just Aryan and Seraph, and the armor that had waited 3 centuries for their names to align. What happens now? Aryan asked. Seraph looked at the armor, then at him, then smiled. A real smile this time, unguarded and genuine. Now we figure out what it means to be bound to someone across dimensions. Together. Together, Aryan agreed. Though I reserve the right to make inappropriate jokes during any future cosmic bonding experiences. I wouldn't expect anything less. The temple began breathing again around them, its walls expanding and contracting in their slow rhythm. Somewhere in its ancient structure, the star engines settled back into dormancy, patient once more, waiting for the next time they would be needed.